All right, so for today's lesson, guys, we're actually going to be working with a rotation. We are going to be starting with transforming geometric figures or points, in this case, using rotation. So that is our objective. This is our vocabulary. So make sure you guys pause the video and write this part down. This is our vocab. That is our vocabulary here. So make sure you guys pause and copy this down. So I actually want to go ahead and get started here, guys, with this circle here. We're actually going to be talking about the different types of rotation based on a center. Once again, the center, for most of the part, it is going to be at the origin. In other occasions, it's just going to be points that you probably have to estimate in this case to see what they represent. So let me go ahead and actually begin here. So starting off, one thing, we actually can go two different ways. If we decide to go a direction where it's, in this case, is going clockwise, which means we're going with the clock, which is this direction, our rotation in this case is negative. So clockwise, we have a negative rotation. And in this case, when we rotate, we're rotating using degrees in this case. So if we take a look at the circle, a whole circle in this case would be 360 degrees. That's doing a full rotation. So that would be going clockwise, once again, being negative. If we decide to go counterclockwise, which means go against the clock, which would be, let's say, this direction, that's going against the clock, that would actually be counterclockwise. And I'll go ahead and put it on the top. Counterclockwise. And when the direction is going counterclockwise, we have a positive rotation. Positive rotation. So we'll go ahead and start off with that. Once again, counterclockwise is positive. Clockwise is negative. So I am going to be erasing this part here. And now I want to go ahead and get started here. So if we're starting at the origin, and let's say we draw a line here. This could either be a 0 degrees or 360 degrees. If you, your starting point would be at 0, or if you end up in your starting point, it's because you did a full circle already. If we decide to go up, which is this direction here, that would actually be 90 degree. That is 90 degrees. Right, so from here to there where it's in purple, which is all of this here, that would actually be representing 90 degrees. If we decide to do, in this case, a semicircle, which means go from zero all the way to this side, that would actually be 180 degrees. 180 degrees. And this is obviously assuming that we're going counterclockwise. If we're going clockwise, in this case, the degrees would be negative. The other one on the bottom in this case would be a 270 degree rotation. And then we start off back at 360. Now, a few things I want to go ahead and focus in this case. Half of 90, which would actually be somewhere here, right? A little bit, accurate there. Half of 90 in this case would actually indicate a 45 degree angle. We could also do something that's shorter than that, and that could be 30 degrees. That's 30 degrees. And we could also, in this case, have 60 degrees. And that was a little off there. 60 degrees. All right. So we could go from 0 to 30. It could also be 15 if you want to, even cut it shorter here. That could be 15. Right, that could also be probably 75. And then we go up to 90, right? So then each time, that's more or less the breakup. If I decide to, in this case, break up the difference between 180 and 90, half of that would actually be at 135. And then we could go on from there, right? You could actually break it up into the same sections we did over here on this side, just to find the other angles, right? So we are going to be working with different problems where we have to estimate the type of rotation. So let's go ahead and take a look at a few of our examples in this case here. So once again, guys, a few things to remember. Clockwise is negative. Counterclockwise is positive. All right. So let's go ahead and begin here. Let's go ahead and begin. And we are starting off in this case with example number 1. Now, in example number 1, it says point P was rotated about the origin at 0, 0 by a negative 15 degrees. Which point is the image of P? So first of all, they are telling us that our center is at 0, 0, and we are moving negative 15 degrees. If it's negative, that means that we're actually going to be moving clockwise, which means we're going to be going this direction, all right, from P. So because they're telling us that our center is at 0, 0, I am going to be plotting a point at 0, 0. And I'm actually going to draw a line from P to the center, or from the center to P. Going to have something like this, right? And we want to go ahead and move clockwise in this case. Clockwise would actually be meaning that we're going to go this direction, right? Now, in this case, if we're going clockwise, that means we're going to go ahead and once again be going up. And the only one that seems to be 15 degrees would actually be D, right? C could also be considered 15 degrees as well, but it has to be at the same height as P in this case. If I were to actually be forming a circle with this here, that point would have to fall, assuming that's a perfect circle, right? That would actually have to fall within a circle similar to here, right? So C could also be considered 15 degrees, but it's not because it's not at the same height as P. So my answer for this one, which means I could say that the image of P, of point P, is point D. All right. So the image in this case of P is point D. Once again, because we're going clockwise, we're going to go upward in this case, and the only one that probably matches to it would be D. Now, let's go ahead and move on to example 2. In this one, it says that point Q was rotated negative 150 degrees. The center of rotation is indicated. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the origin, but if they are telling you that the center is a certain point, which in this case they're telling us that that's the center, then we have to go based on that. They're also telling us that we have a negative 150, which means we're moving in a clockwise direction. A clockwise direction. So let's go ahead and start off in this case by connecting the center to Q, to point Q. Let's go ahead and erase that and do it again. To point Q. Now, if we're moving clockwise once again, we have to go this direction, right? Now, I'm going to try to draw a nice even circle here. Oh, wow, that was really close. Amazing. All right. So if you take a look at this here, if I were to actually draw a full circle, the only points that are around the same probably radius as the center to Q is A and B. So I'm actually going to cross out C and D because those don't even fall under there. Now, the next thing I want to go ahead and do is I actually want to go ahead and extend the line that I drew from the center to Q and make a straight line. So that way I could go through our circle here, right? Now, I am doing this line because if you guys recall from the beginning, a line equals 180 degrees, right? And if you guys actually take a look at this here, 180 degrees is a lot closer to 150. So if I were to compare this once again to 180, which of these 2 points is closer to 180? And the point would actually be A. It would actually be A. If I were to actually cut this in half, this is 90, right? And if I were to compare that to the 90 in this case, compare it to the 90 here, 150 isn't closer to 90. It's closer to 180. So once again, the best choice for us would be A. So the image of point Q is point A. And once again, we were moving in a clockwise direction, which means we're going this direction. So we have, in this case, this angle here. That would be 150 degrees. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next one. Now, on this next one, we want to go ahead and determine the angle of rotation. So on this one, I'm actually not providing a multiple choice answer, so we do have to do a little estimate here. So it says triangle A prime, B prime, C prime is the image of triangle ABC under rotation about point Q. Now, because it does say image means that it's actually the new image, new figure in this case. Pre-image would be considered ABC. So that's actually part of the vocab. First thing, we obviously know that the center is going to be Q. Center is Q because it says it's rotated about point Q, which means that is the center. That there is our center. So you're actually going to choose a point from your original one, and you're going to go ahead and see how you can go to the new one. So let's say I want to go ahead and choose A. Let's go ahead and choose A, and I'm actually going to connect the line point A to point Q, which is our center. And I'm also going to go ahead and do that with A prime. Now, whenever you're working with these here, you're actually going to be going from the pre-image. So let me actually just label this here. This one here is a pre-image. That one there is a pre-image. And this one here is the image, which means this is the original. And this one is the new. So you want to go ahead and see how you go from the original to the new. So there's actually two ways we could rotate this. I could actually go a long way in this case, which means go all the way over here and then, do that angle. Or I could decide to go to the shorter version. In this case, I actually want to go ahead and see if we could do the shorter version of this, right? We want to go ahead and determine how much that angle is, right? Now, once again, we are going to be comparing this to a line, which is 180. So I am going to be extending our lines in this case. So from the original point through the center, we're going to go ahead and create a line. Once again, creating this line gives us 180 degrees. And I'm also going to cut that line in half. And I want to go ahead and compare it and see if it's going to be an angle that's going to be closer to 180 or if it's going to be one that's closer to a 90-degree angle. Now, if I decide to go through the shorter version, we're actually going in the direction of counterclockwise. Let me actually do a different color here. We're going in the counterclockwise direction. Counterclockwise direction, which means that our angle will be positive. So angle of rotation needs to be positive here. So if I were to compare that in this case, it is going to be closer to 90. If I try to cut that in half, right, it's obviously going to be less than 135. So I want to say our angle of rotation here, it's going to be an estimate. It's not exact. Angle of rotation in this case is between, because I'm not going to give an exact answer here, between, I want to say maybe 105 to 115. I feel like it's closer to 115, but it's between these two. And because it's going clockwise, counterclockwise, it is going to be positive. So our angle of rotation here is a positive. Well, let me actually do it next to the counterclockwise part. This is positive. All right. When you do your assignment, it is going to be giving you a multiple choice. But in this case, I didn't include it. So it's just a ballpoint here. So once again, this here, I want to say it's probably around 105 to 115. 105 to 115. All right. So let's go ahead and move on. Go ahead and move on. That was about a 105 to 115 rotation. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next one. In this case, take a look at the next one. And on this one, we have triangles A prime, B prime, C prime is the image of triangle ABC under rotation of the origin. We want to go ahead and determine the angle here. So let's go ahead and plot our origin first, 0, 0. And once again, you could choose any point to work with. I could work with B in this case, and B prime. I could do C and C prime. In this case, I'm actually just going to be working with A and A prime again, but you could choose any other point. Draw a line, and I am just going to be making my line a little longer in this case. And once again, our goal is to go from the pre-image. Once again, this one's our pre-image, and this one is our image. Once again, the original with the new. Okay, so in this case, we actually want to go ahead and go either clockwise or counterclockwise rotation. On this one, I am going to be going with the shorter version. So like I said, there's two different angles here that you could choose. It could be a longer version, which is the one going from here to there. That's actually going to be more than 180, or you could choose the shorter version, which is going to be less than 180. So we are going to be going in this case, once again, from A to A prime. So that is actually going in, let me go back here. That is going in a clockwise direction. So this here is actually going clockwise. Let's go ahead and write that. This is clockwise, which means our angle of rotation is negative. Angle of rotation here is a negative. So let's go ahead and actually compare that. So once again, I am going to be drawing or extending this line. I'm going to go ahead and do it in orange. Once again, it's from the original to the center. And you're going to extend it. And let's go ahead and actually cut that in half. Cut it in half, right? More or less. It's a little off. All right. And if I were to compare to this angle, actually, the one that's in once again in green, I'll go ahead and highlight over it in yellow here. It actually seems like it's right in the middle of the 90 degree, which is here, and the 180 degrees. So I want to go ahead and say that this angle here is going to be about maybe 135 degrees. Could be wrong, but in this case, it's 135, and because it's clockwise, it's actually negative 135. So that's actually going to be our angle of rotation. I want to see that would be the most precise one. Once again, I have options here for us to list, but that would be more or less my idea as what the angle would be, 135. And it's negative. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next part here. Now, on this next part, in this case, we're actually going to talk about different rules of rotation. If in this case they're asking us to rotate an image or a point in this case in certain rotations, there's actually formulas for that. So, and they're actually multiples of 90. So let's actually start off with that. Starting off in this case, guys, if they're asking us to do a 90-degree rotation, 90-degree rotation. Another way we could express this, it could also be a negative 270 degrees. So if they tell you to do 90 degrees or negative 270 degrees, it follows the same thing. So in this case, if you have your point, let's say your point in this case is A, and the point consists of X and Y. If they asked us to do a rotation of 90 degrees or a negative 270, then A prime is actually going to now be a negative Y and X, which means that the X and the Y of the original point change positions, right? X becomes the new Y, Y becomes the new X, and the sign of the original Y changes. It changes. So if it's negative, it now becomes positive, and if it's positive, now it becomes negative. So an example in this case, let's say I have, I don't know, let's say I have the point 2, 5. And I want to go ahead and do, in this case, a rotation of 90 degrees based on this point. If we do that, the new x value for the a prime is actually going to be 5. Once again, they're switching positions. And let me do that again. It's going to be 5. And in this case, negative, because the 5 originally was positive. And it says we have to change signs. And the new y is actually going to be the old x. So that would actually be our point. If I do from a to a prime, once again, that 90-degree rotation, you switch positions with x and y, and then y becomes negative. So another example here. If I have the point B, which is 7, -3, if I want to go ahead and do B prime, that's now going to be a +3 because it initially started as a negative, but now it's a positive, and then the 7. All right. So those are some examples with the 90-degree rotation. The next one I want to go ahead and talk about is 180-degree rotation. Or if they refer to this as also a -180 degrees, it is the same thing. Now, the rotation on this one is going to be if you have the point, let's say A, and once again, it's X and Y. Our rotation for this one, if we do 180 for A prime, would actually now be a -x, -y, which means X and Y stay the same. They're just changing signs. So example, in this case, say I have point C and I have a -5 and 3. Now, if I want to go ahead and find C prime is now going to be a +5 and a -3 because once again, they're not switching positions, they're switching signs. See if try next one, D is going to be -4 and -11. So then D prime in this case would be 4 and 11. All right, and that's a 180 rotation. Last one in this case I want to go ahead and talk about is the 270-degree rotation. Or if they mention in this case a -90-degree rotation, it's the same thing. So for this one, we have once again the point A, which is X, Y. And if we want to go ahead and do a 270-degree rotation on this one for A prime, it's actually now going to be Y, -x. Which means in this case, it follows the same idea as a 90-degree where you're switching positions for X and Y. But now the X is the one that's negative, not the Y. So let's go ahead and take a look at some points here. Let's say E, in this case, is a point -8, 6. If we want to go ahead and find E prime, once again, X and Y switch positions. So this is now 6. And this is now going to become a +8 because the new Y or the old X switches signs. And another point, we have F, which is 7, 3. In this case, F prime would now be a 3, -7. And that would actually be just examples on rotations based upon points. So using this information, I want you guys to try example number 5 on your own. So go ahead and do example 5 on your own. Make sure you guys draw out that image. And that would actually be concluding